Hello, I'm Jim Leslie. I'm a Blue Badge tourist guide and this is 2022, the year of stories. My story today is about one of Scotland's 6 World Heritage Sites. In my opinion, my favourite of the heritage sites, it is the iconic Forth Bridge. 1.5 miles long, 360 feet high, 55,000 tonnes of steel sitting on 640,000 tonnes of Aberdeen granite. For 1,000 years, this bridge was an impossible dream. After its construction, bridge building would never be the same again. The sheer scale of this bridge can only be seen when you see the trains passing across it looking so tiny. The River Forth is a major barrier to travel in Scotland for most of our history. It cuts across the centre of Scotland, really making it difficult for anybody travelling from the south to the north. In the 11th century, our Queen Margaret, she established a ferry that crossed the river from South Queensferry on the other side to North Queensferry, where we are today. Now, that ferry was to run for 900 years. Now, the ferrymen, they were a bunch of rogues. They weren't averse to demanding more money as you were halfway across the river, and if you refused to pay up, then they would abandon you on one of the islands in midstream. That ferry ran all the way until 1964, when a road bridge was constructed a few hundred yards upstream. In the 1870s, railway fever was sweeping the nation. Lines were springing up all across the country, including Scotland. However, they did not travel much further north than this. There were the 2 big barriers, the River Tay and the River Forth. Now, in 1878, the River Tay, the first of the big barriers, it had been bridged to huge acclaim. This was an engineering marvel, and the architect, Sir Thomas Bush, was tasked with building across this river, the River Forth. He started work, however, less than a month after he had begun his bridge, and only a year after the construction of the Tay rail bridge, disaster struck. In the midst of a winter storm, as a train full of passengers was crossing the bridge collapsed. The train, its passengers, fell to a watery doom. This was a huge blow to the confidence of the Victorians. Thomas Bush, his reputation was destroyed. He could no longer be trusted to build this bridge across the river, and so the task was passed to 2 other engineers. 2 new architects were appointed, Sir John Fowler and Benjamin Baker. They were determined not to have another disaster, and yet the challenges facing them on the River Forth were far greater than the Tay. The normal solution, which would have been a viaduct, was not possible because the river had to remain open for shipping. So they came up with a pretty new innovative design, a cantilever bridge. Now, cantilever bridges had been used in Germany a few years previously, but on a much smaller scale. A cantilever bridge works with 2 central supports holding a bridge, and that bridge itself is not further supported. Now, the people of Scotland needed some convincing. There's a very famous photograph of Benjamin Baker and Sir John Fowler sitting on chairs holding a seat with a 3rd engineer, just to demonstrate how strong this system could actually be. To build the bridge, North and South Queensferry were turned into 2 massive construction yards. Roads were built, sheds, warehouses, marshalling yards to manage the thousands of tons of equipment needed to build this magnificent bridge. The bridge was actually constructed twice, once here in North Queensferry on dry land, just to show that the system would work, then deconstructed and then reconstructed to cross the river. Bridge builders, were working 24 hours a day. The technology needed to build this bridge was so new that new tools had to be invented, including a giant jackhammer and a riveting machine. A riveting machine much needed because the bridge has 6.5 million rivets. The foundations alone took 3 years to build, whilst the bridge itself took 8 years. It was the first major steel structure to be built in the whole of the United Kingdom. Its cost, £3 million today, would be worth billions, and the human cost was also high. In the days before health and safety, at least 73 people died constructing the bridge, the youngest being a 13-year-old riveter. Probably working with his family. Riveters tended to work in teams of 4, and they often were family affairs. The final rivet was actually inserted by the Prince of Wales before the bridge was opened by Queen Victoria. Gustav Eiffel, who was present at the opening, declared that this was the greatest engineering marvel of the century. Despite the strength of this bridge, people were still concerned about its safety, and so the engineers came up with the ultimate PR stunt. 2 trains, each consisting of 2 locomotives pulling 50 wagons, each wagon containing 13 tonnes of gravel with a 3rd locomotive at the rear, crossed the bridge together to demonstrate the strength of the bridge. The opening of the bridge took 5 hours off the train time from London to Aberdeen, reducing it to 8 hours. The bridge today remains a critical part of Scotland's infrastructure. It is hard to believe that at the time it was opened, a bit like the Eiffel Tower, people thought it was ugly. One paper said that the only way to improve it was to hang the designers from the highest girder and dynamite the bridge. Recognised in World War II as a critical link for Scotland, the very first battle of the Battle of Britain took place just 6 weeks after war had been declared. The Luftwaffe flew over to hopefully bomb the Royal Navy, who were moored in the River Forth. The bridge was used as an aiming point and also a secondary target. The first deployment of Spitfires went up, shot down 3 of the 12 Luftwaffe planes, and the Battle of Britain had begun. The bridge today, just one of our many iconic sites. This is a bridge that truly was built to last forever.